As conferences and events are planning for next year, how can you stand out and get selected as a speaker? Listen into this conversation with Sarah Soliman and Diane Diaz on this episode of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. More and more women are making an impact by starting businesses, running for office, and speaking up for what matters. With my background as a TV political analyst, entrepreneur, and speaker, I interview and coach purpose-driven women to shape their brands, grow their companies, and become recognized as influencers in their field. This is Speaking Your Brand, your place to learn how to persuasively communicate your message to your audience. Hi, welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cox. Speaking season is ramping up both virtually and in person as more conferences and events are coming back in person, especially as we look to 2022. How can you stand out and get selected as a speaker? And we're talking both about outbound speaking proposals that you submit to speak at events and conferences. How can you stand out? But then also, how can you attract event organizers to find you and to ask you to speak? This is what happened to me with the recent keynote speaking engagement that I had. And you can listen to all of the details about that on last week's episode, where I take you behind the scenes as far as how that speaking engagement came about, how I created my speech and prepared for it, and what happened the day of. So go back to your podcast app and listen to last week's episode after you listen to this one. But this conversation is so rich. I took notes as I was listening to it as well. Our guest is Sarah Soliman, who's the founder of Soliman Productions, which is a full video content firm that shoots and produces videos. They also manage and execute hybrid events as well as full virtual experiences from start to finish. Sarah Soliman is also active with MPI, Meeting Professionals International. So she has seen many speakers over the years and has selected speakers herself. So in this episode, Sarah and Diane Diaz, our lead speaking coach, take you behind the scenes to talk about what meeting planners look for in speakers. So what are the things that you should be doing on LinkedIn, on the speaking page on your website, on the content that you're creating and putting out there? What can you put together that's going to attract you to those meeting planners and event organizers? Sarah also gives excellent detail about what kinds of video clips, what kinds of sizzle reels that you should have as a speaker. She also talks about how to get the best from videography when you're speaking at events. So hiring a video production team to come and film you. This is what I do when I have speaking engagements in Orlando. I've hired Sarah's company several times, as has Diane, to film us so that we have that professional footage. Sarah and Diane also talk about the importance of being consistent with your brand and your thought leadership output. And then how you as a speaker can make the conference organizer's job easier. And then they end, and I love how they ended with this, talking about the power of leading with personal story and with emotion in your speaking engagements. And I had touched on this regarding my keynote in last week's episode as well. This conversation is a replay of our LinkedIn live show. We host our Backstage with Speaking Your Brand LinkedIn live show every other Monday. It's so fun because either it's myself and Diane, or one of us has a guest or a couple of guests on, where we take you behind the scenes and talk about things that you would want to know as a speaker and as an entrepreneur. There's a link in the show notes here at speakingyourbrand.com/245. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/245. You can go to the show notes to get the link if you want to watch the video replay of this conversation. And then if you would like to make sure that you're notified of future LinkedIn live shows that we have, be sure that you're on our email list. That's really the best place to be so that you don't miss anything. And the best way to get on our email list is you can get a 2-for-1. You can download our free workbook on how to position yourself as a thought leader, which goes so well with this idea of how to stand out and get selected as a speaker. So if you go to opt in for our free workbook, you'll also be added to our email list. Go to speakingyourbrand.com/guide. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/guide to get on our email list and to download that free workbook. Now, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Backstage at Speaking Your Brand. And thank you to everybody who is joining us over on LinkedIn Live. Thank you for joining me, Sarah, on Backstage at Speaking Your Brand.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I am so happy that you agreed to chat with us and share your expertise with our audience, but also because, as I was just saying to you before we went live, I haven't seen a lot of in-person people in a while, and you're one of my favorite people. And I usually see you at events and various things that we attend, see you out and about, but haven't been able to do that. So it's just so nice to finally talk to you again.
I know. I was so excited when you emailed me for that reason. I'm like, gosh, I used to see Diane like at least twice a month, it felt like. And then it just went to completely nothing through this past year. So
I know.
it's great to see you, albeit virtually, but hopefully I'll actually see you in person soon.
Yes, I'm hoping so. Fingers crossed. And that brings me to what our topic will be today, which will be all around events and speakers. But first, before we do that, let me just I just will tell people who you are and like what your title is. But then I want you to kind of tell everybody what you do in your business, because you do a lot more than what it might appear at first to be, which, I would say you're in the videography space, but it is so much more than that. So our guest today, everybody, is Sarah Soliman, who is, if I get this wrong, you can correct me, CEO and president of Soliman Productions. And they do videography. And in fact, I have hired them myself, for their team, Sarah's team, to do videography for me for several speaking engagements that I had, in-person speaking engagements. But they do a lot more than that. So I'll just let you, Sarah, kind of tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about like all the things that you offer with Soliman Productions.
Soliman Productions is a visual, I like to say we're a visual storytelling business. So I often tell my team, although you are amazing and you excel at videography, we're so much more than that, because we're really there to tell your story. So what that means is we work for the most part within the meetings and events industry with event organizers to help them take content that happens at their annual meeting or event and really repurpose that content through video storytelling throughout the year. So it's kind of like a 365-day opportunity for them to take content, video content, and even still. So we do photography as well, some social media marketing, and really kind of develop that into a really good strategy for better storytelling throughout the year. And in turn, they're able to, as event organizers, generate revenue off of what we do, because they're able to expand their membership, especially if it's an association, gain more traction, new attendees, new faces at their next event, and then also find unique creative ways to sell sponsorship through the content that we produce on site. So it's a lot, but it's so much fun. My background is in journalism, so it's kind of like that nice journalistic element, but throwing it into the events industry.
And I know that you are also really involved in the professional association for the industry that you're in. So is that Meeting Professionals International?
Meeting Professionals International, so MPI for short. And MPI is actually the largest organization that is home to a lot of event organizers, whether it's associations or corporate event planners as well. So it's an international group, hence the international in their name. And it's I volunteer on both the local board here in Orlando, but then I also am part of their global board of trustees, which serves the MPI Foundation. So very much entrenched in this space and super involved well past, my day-to-day business.
Yes. And I wanted to kind of talk about both of those things, because that kind of ties into what we're going to be talking about today, because everybody, Sarah obviously has been around a lot of speakers and been involved in numerous events and conferences. And Sarah, I always see the things that you share, kind of the behind the scenes of what your team is doing at these different conferences. And so I know that you're exposed to speakers all the time. So you know what works, what doesn't, how event organizers and conferences look for speakers, what they look for in speakers, and how someone could be a standout speaker to get chosen by a conference or by an event to do a keynote talk there, or some sort of, breakout session or something like that. So I want for us to be able to pick your brain and share with our audience all of the ins and outs of that, because Speaking Your Brand, of course, we're helping women tell their stories and share their stories through speaking to, either build their business or build their thought leadership. So a lot of our clients are applying to speak at conferences and events. I guess since you're exposed to these, meeting planners, what would you say are some of the top things that either that they are looking for in speakers, or that you see in very effective speakers at these different conferences?
I love this question and this conversation. I actually get approached often from event organizers looking for speakers because I do have so much experience covering so many different industries and so many different events. So I've seen and I've heard, and I remember, even for me, out of the hundreds of events that we've covered over the past 10 years, basically, who has been effective and who I continue to see sort of like repeat speakers, if you will, for various industries and organizations. So with that being said, the first thing that organizers want to ensure is that you are an expert in what you talk about, and not just an expert, but that you are known for that one thing. So for example, if you are a branding expert and you're a speaker that really excels in all things branding, whether it's for individuals or for businesses or whatever it is, do that and do that well. Where I see a lot of confusion start to happen, and also speakers not booking the gigs that they are applying for, is when you've got so much going on and the event organizer sort of gets lost in who you are. So it may not necessarily work for their audience, right? So really, really hone in on that one level of expertise that you are known for, and ensure that that is what the event organizers is seeing and hearing out of you and out of your, the call for speaker application or whatever it is that you are applying for.
That is such a great point. And before I make my comment on that, I just want to let everybody know, pop your questions in the comments. We will answer any questions that you have too. And even after we finish the live today, you can come back to this post on LinkedIn and you can pop your questions in there and I'll go in and answer them. Hopefully, Sarah, you can pop in and answer those as well. But please share your questions with us, comments, thoughts, anything that we can have to sort of, enhance this session or just give you the information that you need, because we want you to be successful as a speaker. But you make such a great point, Sarah, about this idea of drilling down very specifically to that one thing, because I think it's kind of marketing 101, which is to don't appeal to everyone because you appeal to no one if you do that. So to be very clear on who you are and what it is that you speak on and deliver that one key topic or area of knowledge so that this, like you said, the conference organizers or the speaker selection committee knows what it is you bring to their audience.
Right. And the other thing I'll add to that is, so you may be, I'll just keep using this branding expert because it's just what's in my brain right now. But if you are, let's say, a branding expert as a speaker, relate that back to the industry that you are applying for. So for example, if you are applying to speak at, everyone can use branding, right? So if you are applying to speak at a conference for architects, great. Well, do some research on that industry and don't just blindly apply and send in your application and say, oh, this, I'm great. This is why, because I've spoken at all of these other places. No, really narrow it down to that industry and explain why and how you will apply your knowledge and what you know as a branding expert to this architect association, right? Because now they can really envision and see and sort of like picture you on stage speaking to their audience. They really want to understand not just like your basic learning objectives, but how is this going to apply for us in our industry? Have you done the research to understand where architects maybe have a challenge or struggle with branding in their own business? How can you solve for these issues that the association is looking to solve through content? And as we know, content is king and it will continue to be king. So, to really be effective in landing that speaking gig, you really do have to tailor each application to that specific organization.
Yes, that is such a great point. Actually, I just submitted an application for a conference last week. It's for a conference next year. Very involved process, but I would 100% agree with that you really have to tailor it to that specific audience because like you said, you have to show them what value it is you're bringing specifically to the problems they are trying to solve. So how do you fit into that picture that they're trying to paint for their audience? So with that in mind, then, how would you say do speaker reels kind of connect to that? How do they tie in I know, for example, I had to submit a video with this application that I did, but what do you think the connection is with the speaker reel, and how, obviously you can't get super specific in that, but what is a good speaker reel? What's the purpose of it? How does it fit in? How important is it?
Sure, great question. Video speaker reels are increasingly important for a few reasons. So one, the first reason is they want to see that you can actually speak on a stage, right? So although your reel should not be extremely, well, actually, here's the thing. You should actually have two reels. One that is short and sweet and kind of spunky, right? And it sort of does, it's a sizzle reel, if you will. It highlights you and paints you in a picture that is kind of cool and modern and appealing. And, maybe it has all the different shows that you've spoken at before in the past. It shows you sort of like quick shots of you on stage. Like it shows that appeal that you have as a speaker. That's one. Your second one should be a little lengthier. And what I mean by that is not like a 10-minute reel. No one has time to watch that. But maybe like, you can do a lot in 2-3 minutes, right, of a speaker reel. And it's really about taking the best bits of your past presentations, different portions of it, and piecing it together. And the reason for doing so is because then it gives the event organizer an opportunity to actually hear you and see what your mannerisms are like on stage. Do you stand in one space, or do you, walk up and down the stage? Do you make eye contact, or are you staring at the back of the room? Like there's so many different things that they're looking for outside of just ensuring that you are the expert in whatever it is that you speak on. So it's their opportunity to sort of analyze you. It's an interview without it being an interview, right? But if you give them both of those types of reels, one that's a little shorter and sexier, if you will, visually appealing, but then one that is really content driven and forward, now they've got some stuff to work with. And then of course I would always package it with, although still images, they're still images, right? Like there's no movement, but they do go a long way. So don't hesitate if there's an opportunity within your application to also upload any additional visuals. It's all about the visuals. So they just want to make sure, and also how you present yourself. Do you dress a certain way that won't be appropriate for my audience? I mean, it's a lot of, it sounds superficial, but at the end of the day, you're representing that organization and their members, and they want to ensure that you are, in fact, the right fit for them in all aspects. If you don't have a demo reel yet, definitely look into getting one done. And also, you should be thinking about getting your presentations. I know a lot of speakers shy away from this for obvious reasons, but just for your internal use, you should look at capturing your presentations from start to finish, and then just archiving them for your own, especially if you're speaking at bigger conferences, and archiving that for your own use. That way, when you are ready to create a demo reel, you're pulling from those longer presentations that you've recorded. Don't post them on YouTube and all that stuff because you don't want your content to get stolen, but you've got it at least. And that way you've got more in your back pocket to be able to present to an event planner.
That is such a really great point, because I remember, it's in the before times, so the before COVID times when I was speaking in person, I had hired you to video several of my talks. And now in retrospect, I obviously understand it a lot more, but I remember, you telling me, let's get several of your talks and then we can kind of choose in bits and pieces of those. It does make for such a more interesting speaker reel, because now it's not just, you speaking at just one event. You're kind of interspersing different audience shots and different individual shots on the stage, and you're in different outfits and it's different sort of venue. And so it makes for a much more interesting dynamic of the speaker in the presentation and that speaker reel. And obviously you created that speaker reel for me, but what kind of goes into your thinking when you and your team kind of shoot the whole talk? What goes into your thinking when you're pulling bits and pieces to create that speaker reel that's effective?
Those aha moments. So the moments where, Diane, if I hear you speak at, let's say, 3 different conferences, the aha moment for, presentation 1, 2, and 3 that are all different, and piecing that together. So it's our job to tell your story. as best as we can as we're creating your reel. So, what did we walk away with that was the best key takeaway, if you will, out of your 60-minute presentation that will really drive the message home for an event organizer when they're watching your reel? And I do see a question from Lee in our chat that says, how long did you say the sizzle reel should be? And can it include mostly photos and audio clips? So this kind of speaks into like what your question is, Diane, what do you look for? So the sizzle reel, you should have two. So the first one should be about 60 seconds or so. And then your second one, I would say 2 to 3 minutes. And in that 2 to 3 minute one, you definitely don't want to only or mostly use photos, because what that does is it makes people think that you just kind of stood on a stage and have people take pictures. Audio clips are great, but you want audio and video. So you want the video to match your audio, and you want to be able to see and hear the speaker present. So what my team does is that's exactly what we look for. Sometimes we've produced demo reels of like just still images and then some audio clips, and then there's not a lot of video to work with. So it's not as effective because I don't get to see you and hear you. I only get to hear you. So it really is about tying all of those elements together for an event organizer so they can see you as a full package. Think about it as you're going to an interview, for a big job that you want every single time. That's essentially what you're doing. You're applying for a job every single time. So what would you do at an interview? You wear, a nice dress or a nice suit. You comb your hair a certain way. You do things a certain way. You bring your A game, right? So that way you get the A game position. You get that all-star position. So when you're speaking or when you're applying to speak, just think about those elements and remember that you are applying for a job interview. So as you are speaking, capture yourself getting the job, because now you've got the job, you're on stage. Have someone capture that on your behalf and then repurpose that to your benefit for that next job interview that you're going on, right? Like that is your living, breathing proof that you are in fact good at what you do. I love what you said, Diane, about we captured several of your talks. And the reason for that is because you do want to show that you are diversified. Not only did I just do the speaking thing once, I did it 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. And look, here's all the proof in the pudding to show. So that's another really, really key thing. And then another thing that I think you should include in your demo reel, if possible, and usually in the longer one, are testimonials from clients. So this is where I think a lot of speakers, something that you forget to do. I mean, we're all guilty of that. Even myself as a business owner, I'm like, we're always just on to the next thing. But really take the time to capture testimonials from both your event organizer, so your client, but then if you have the opportunity, from the attendees, because the attendees are the ones that are going to be requesting or, providing that survey, the feedback to the event organizer. So capture those testimonials, and then you can also use those as part of your sales kit when you're off to, applying for your next speaker role.
Great. So if we're hiring a videographer, Sarah, like your company, or if someone lives somewhere else and is, hiring someone else, is that something that we ask of the videographer? Is that, hey, can you capture people leaving my talk and get them captured on video? Is that something that you all do? And I would say part B to that question, what other sorts of things do you think about when you're capturing speakers? Like, do you have 2 cameras? I know you said you do the stationary shots too, B-roll. What all goes into that?
And I can speak for, I think, most production companies. So I don't want to just, make this about us at all. There's a lot of wonderful production companies, and you should work with one in your town. Yes, if you should definitely ask for a couple of things. One, record my full presentation from start to finish. That production team should show up early, on site, set up, usually in the back of the room, and they're rolling on you from start to finish. At the end of that presentation, you should definitely request and communicate that you would like testimonials from attendees, and try to help your production team understand the purpose and the goal of what you're looking to accomplish. So they're not just like, what exactly am I doing? Like, I'm a journalist by trade, so I would be like, oh, no problem, I got it. I know what you're looking for, but not everyone has that brain. So just make sure you're communicating with your production team to say, this is what I'm looking to do. I really want to build my speaker portfolio, my demo reel, my sales kit, whatever it may be. If you can just, as people are walking out, ask, what were your key takeaways from Diane's presentation? How did her message or his message add value to your attendee experience here at this conference, right? So really ask those specific questions. And then what your team should do, your production team afterwards, is really put all of that story together. So now you've got this compelling piece of content to share back with the next event organizer that you go and apply for. The other thing that I'll say is, outside of just standing in the back of the room and recording, you should also see if there's an opportunity for that team to bring an additional videographer in to capture what we call B-roll, which you mentioned, B-roll, right? So for those of you that may not be familiar with that jargon, B-roll is just basically footage. So it's highlight footage, if you will, of maybe if Diane's on stage, like we're a little bit closer to the stage getting one angle, and then we're like off to the other side getting another angle. Like that's what B-roll is. Also, I am all about emotion. And so we're event organizers. And I want to get into that, maybe in our next discussion, but capturing the emotion of the audience as they are listening to you. That's huge. And that should be included in your longer demo reel, because that helps tie it all together. So if I'm an attendee and your message is so moving, and you see, and my team is like trained to look for this stuff, which most production teams should be, or at least, maybe you communicate that with them. Can you please look at the audience? And if you see someone taking notes, or they're just really engaged, or there are tears in their eyes because of my presentation and I've moved them to tears, literally, can you capture that? Those are those aha moments of a phenomenal speaker, when you can move the audience, in one direction or the other, and that should be captured in some capacity. So hopefully that helps. And Lee, I hope I've answered your question too, but hopefully that helps kind of paint the picture for what your demo reel, or reels, I should say, should look like.
Yes. No, I think that's really good. And I love that idea of capturing the emotion in the audience, because I think that paints a much bigger story that you're telling to the conference organizers than just, hey, here's me speaking on a stage. But it's like, no, here's how the audience received what I was saying, right? It has such greater impact. So let me connect that to a comment here from Joy Spencer. And she said, seems like that's my next assignment, getting a stage speaking gig so I can start building my reel. But let me ask you, Sarah, is it necessary to wait until you're on a stage, or can you start getting video at smaller events? Let's say you speak to a local chamber of commerce and maybe there's only 15 people in the audience. Can you turn that into portions of your speaker reel if that's all you're getting for the moment?
Absolutely. And when we say speaking, and thanks, Joy, for that, because I should clarify, I say stage, but stage can be just in front of a room. It doesn't have to physically be a stage. If you are in front of an audience, I don't care if it's an audience of 5 or an audience of 500, you are there to share a message, to deliver a presentation. Someone trusted you enough with the content that you're presenting to put you in front of that room. And that is enough and that's significant enough for you to start building from there. I have done very small gigs, where speaking gigs on my own, that, I always try to have someone from my team there, because it does go a long way. And again, it's all about showing that you can be diverse. So some of the best speaking gigs that you can possibly get are actually for smaller groups. For example, a board of directors meeting. Mm-hmm. I get, I'm on these boards, and we are always looking for speakers to come in and talk to us about whatever it is that we're challenged with for that time frame, right? As a board, as volunteers, as people who are committed to said organization that we serve. That is not a small gig for you. That's a big deal. And I know, Diane, you've done this. Like, you go and you speak to corporate groups, and corporate groups can be small sales teams that need some, motivational speaker or whatever. And that can be a group of 20 people. So all of that is significant enough for you to absolutely get that captured and then build from there. It's actually kind of nice to see the growth, as an organizer.
And I would say a skilled videography company, such that yours is, Sarah, I know, can also take those smaller events and still be able to show them in a way that they don't look sparse. They look very lively and engaging. So, I wouldn't I mean, from my personal experience, I wouldn't recommend just waiting till you're on a stage. I mean, that's great, but go ahead and start getting video because I agree. And, just seeing the work that you all do, Sarah, at your company with your team and what you've done for my speaking reels. I mean, I know you can turn kind of smaller speaking gigs into really powerful clips that end up being part of a submission to a conference or go on your website or at least, start to help you get more speaking gigs.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, Sarah, that you are involved on boards where you do have speakers come in. So when you are the one on the other side that's actually trying to find speakers, have you seen any, in your personal experience, have you seen any, like, let's say do's and don'ts of what's worked, what really doesn't work, like don't do this or definitely do this?
So that's an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever seen like an oh no moment, where I'm like, oh gosh, this is just not going to work. Yeah. So what I will say is we look, and most organizers, regardless of size of event, are looking for you to be consistent in your influence. So what I mean by that is, yes, you may submit your reel and you did all the right things, like you checked all the boxes, right, on the back end. But what are you doing day to day on your own platforms? Are you actively living and breathing what you're preaching? To me, is your expertise. So you are, as a speaker, regardless of whether you're a keynote speaker on a big stage or a breakout room speaker speaking to 20 people, it doesn't matter. We look at speakers as part of our stakeholders, and you are a big stakeholder because you, as a speaker, will help drive registration, right? Regardless of how big or small my event is, you help drive my registration.
Mm-hmm.
What I look for personally when I'm looking for a speaker is I will go to your LinkedIn and I'll go to your Facebook and and your website and all of those things. And I'll look at how influential are you outside of just submitting your application to me? Are you actually speaking on all of these things that you are applying for on a consistent basis? Do you have a following? And you don't have to have this tremendous following of thousands, but your 100 followers, are they engaging with you? Are you engaging with them? How influential are you in your community, right? So when it comes for me to book you as a speaker and then promote you, I want to have more content to be promoted that in turn helps drive people back to my event. So you are a stakeholder. You're not just a speaker for that moment in time. You are looked at as a key individual that is part of the fabric and the success of this event or this board meeting or whatever it is that you're doing. I'll say this, and I'm not going to use any names. This is kind of an oh no moment in a way. But this speaker that we had at one of our board meetings was very salesy
mm-hmm.
and didn't understand the audience. I mean, like the way that they were presenting to us was almost condescending. So you don't ever want to come off that way. And I'm sure none of you do this, but like you want to make sure that you're not a turnoff, or also, and this goes for what you're posting online and stuff too. Like you should always be on brand is basically my point. You should always be on brand, because if I look at you as a speaker and you've submitted a certain thing, but then when it comes time to presenting, you are a little bit different than what I thought you were, it's not going to go well. And then and your reputation can be ruined pretty quickly in this space too. It's a small industry. So just keep that stuff in mind as you are putting things out there on social media. Like you are constantly representing yourself as a stakeholder of any future organization that you are going to speak at. And they will use your likeness, as an opportunity to help them develop and promote their and market their event. So just, keep those things in mind.
It sounds like people who are seeking speakers, or the conference organizers, event organizers, people in the event industry like yourself, share with one another, like, hey, this speaker put a hard sales pitch. So maybe beware. So building that reputation is important. Would you say that that's pretty accurate? Like it's not that they're necessarily, saying bad things about one another, but they're going to share if it was a great experience or not.
Yes, 100%. I get approached all the time about speakers that I've seen, like, who would you recommend? So yes, it is a very small, just like any industry, right? Like
Sure.
we all communicate. I'm not an event organizer, but I basically play one on TV all the time. And I work with them all the time. So I understand how it works. And I've been, like I said, I've been approached as to who's a good speaker, who speaks on this, and who's, influential, and who does. So yes, it is very much word of mouth. In addition to how good of an expert are you in that subject matter, but also what was the experience like working with you? And when we say experience, it's not just in your delivery, in front of the room or on stage. It's in how easy were you to work with.
Yes.
Ahead of time. As an organizer, they're dealing with 1.5 million things. There are some speakers that are a little complicated to work with ahead of time. Are you that person?
Don't be that person.
And if you are, don't be that person. Yeah, like, let's change it now, right? So just be easy to work with. Give them a joyful experience from start to finish. And then, of course, in the execution of your presentation, because it is a very small community at the end of the day. And forums like MPI, and for those of you that just joined, MPI is Meeting Professionals International, which is an organization, the largest one, that houses event organizers for associations and corporate companies all over the world. We have community forums where you go and you say, can you send me a speaker, that speaks about blah, 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 or this, who left a mark with your attendees, and you'll just see a list of people that respond. So it's a very tight-knit community. Even though we may have never met in person, we communicate online and share, resources, and speakers are no different.
So that really drives home that point of being a speaker who not only delivers, but is also easy to work with. And I would say makes the job of the event organizer easy, so that they don't have to do all the following up with you, and they don't have to track you down, and you want to just kind of be Johnny on the spot or Jill on the spot with all your information, giving them what they need when they need it on time and all of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't be the speaker that, waits to share their slide deck the night before and gives the event organizer a panic attack, because that will stick with them. It's like on the little details.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be late for your sound check if you have a sound check. Just be the best to work with, along with the best at what you do as a speaker, and just make it an enjoyable experience all around.
Now, we do have a question. John asks in the comments, with COVID, what about capturing virtual engagements? Is that worthwhile?
It is. And here's why. Although it's not as pretty, right, as you like physically being in person and having that audience, we talked about that audience interaction and capturing those moments. What it does tell an event organizer is that you still executed and that you still delivered what you do as a speaker during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that you were committed to your craft, committed to your content, your subject matter, whatever it is. And you didn't just sit back and let things happen, but you happened, right? You happened to COVID. So
yes,
absolutely, it's definitely worth it. And here's what I would recommend in lieu of not having a live audience. What I do recommend is having someone, if you're speaking virtually, have, your friend, your colleague, coworker, whoever, or family member, look at the chat and screenshot, because you're obviously presenting, you don't have time, but screenshot chats that are coming in from the audience. If someone's like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic, or great advice, great information, best speaker I've heard all day during this virtual conference. Those are moments. Those are virtual audience moments. Those are still emotions that you're capturing, just in a different way. And go ahead and screenshot that, because then again, you can in turn use that in your reel, or even just on social media, or whatever it is. So you shouldn't do that yourself so you don't get distracted, but have someone do that for you.
Yes. And would you say there's value in it? Like you said, it demonstrates versatility and that you still delivered, but it also, in my mind, it also demonstrates that you are able to do both things. So let's say in the future, a conference has a hybrid event where they have the in-person and the virtual. They know they can count on you regardless of whichever one you get chosen to do. Would you agree with that?
For sure. And what I've seen happen at events, hybrid events, as they start to make their in-person comeback, is speakers having to do both. And what I mean by that is, yes, you're going to be here physically in, let's say, Dallas, and you're going to present, to our in-person audience. And then, oh, by the way, that your presentation's in person at 1 p.m. and then at 3 p.m., I'm going to have you do a presentation in a green screen room that we've set up at the conference, and it's solely to our virtual people. So there's a lot of that happening too, where you've got to be nimble in those ways and maybe present twice. And one is for in-person, one is for, the online audience. So absolutely, it shows that you are just willing to do the work. Here's another thing. I heard a lot of speakers actually over the past year with COVID say, I don't do as good if I don't have a live audience in front of me. That is unfortunate. And I would tell you that don't say that out loud to people. We all do better with in-person. It's super awkward to sit there and talk to yourself in a Zoom room or wherever. But you are there to show that you can deliver regardless of audience. So don't say that out loud to event organizers. If that's how you feel, that's fine. We all feel that way, but that shouldn't be a common thing. Just figure it out. Find your energy some way, somehow, and give that same kind of delivery that you would have given on, a stage or in person at an event.
And Sarah, is a videography company like yours, is a company like that someone who could help you kind of navigate that? Like, let's say you're invited to do a speaking engagement virtually, but you don't fully understand how do I capture the recording, or how do I make it look nice? Do you help with those types of things? Is that what a company like yours might do?
Well, before you speak, you should always, and organizers probably typically ask you, can we record your presentation? And we share it afterwards. And that's totally up to you what you decide to do with that. If they are recording it, you should always ask for a copy. So if it's virtual and they're recording it, make sure that contractually in your contracts it says, Diane Diaz will receive a copy of her presentation from XYZ organization. Once you have that, then yes, production companies can absolutely go in and kind of add their touch to it and make it so that it's got graphics and your branding, and we can add music, and we sort of jazz it up to make it so that it's its own reel, if you will. And you should have like maybe just a virtual reel, like just of your virtual presentations. Yeah, that's absolutely something that our team or most production companies can do, but you should always ask for your recording if you're speaking virtually, because 9 times out of 10, they are being recorded.
Yes, good to know. That's a good point. And just a comment here, Carol said, I listen to high energy songs before I do a virtual presentation and I stand up to deliver it. That helps with the energy. I think that's a really great point, because when we're sitting down and we're thinking, oh, it's just virtual, I think our energy can tend to go down. And then on the receiving end of it, maybe not such a great experience.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, find that thing that works for you. So whether it's music, some people will wake up early and get a good workout in and then listen to music. Some people just go outside and breathe some fresh air, whatever it is. I mean, find that thing that works for you, when it comes to getting yourself hyped before a virtual presentation.
Now, so once a speaker has applied, they've spoken, they've gotten the video, what can speakers do before, during, and after an event where they've spoken to kind of get the most out of it? What are your suggestions on that?
So ahead of time, and this will make you very attractive to an event organizer as well, is if you also let them know ahead of time that you are willing to record some, and this can be done like via Zoom or whatever, like super simple, some short promotional pieces. So like, hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm, President and CEO of Soliman Productions, and I can't wait to join you guys in Orlando, Florida, and talk about blah, blah, blah. I hope you'll join me because here are the 3 items that we are going to discuss. Can't wait to see you there, right? And then when you do things like that, you're using that for your own self-promotion, which you should post it on your own channels, but then that's also a nice add-on or a nice resource to share with the organizer and say, here you go, I just did this for you if you want to help push, because again, remember, you're a stakeholder, you are part of their circle of influence, their sphere of influence to generate registration. So that's beforehand. During the event, social media is obviously huge. And I think it's really important for you to tell your story while you're there. So if you happen to be traveling to Orlando or, whatever, you're speaking at an event in Orlando, walk people through that journey. So take the time to do your own live, and just say, oh my gosh, I'm 1 hour out from speaking at XYZ conference. I can't wait. There are about 500 people here, or, 200, whatever it is. But like, say those things, because obviously those live elements stay on your social feed, and then that is more content. When I talked earlier about, what are you doing constantly to tell your own story? What's making your reputation grow, and what's, when we go to research you and stuff, those are all things that we want to see. There's a really cool speaker, and I've watched her growth in the industry. She's awesome. Her name is Judy Holler. You all should look her up. She does phenomenal work. And it's Judi and then Holler, Holler. She does a really great job on her Instagram at just that, bringing us on her journey with her as a speaker. So she'll take us behind the scenes, like backstage, and say, okay, I'm at my sound check. This is, the stuff that happens before the magic, and look how empty the room is. Can't wait to see it fill up. And then she'll show us how it fills up. And it's just a really neat way to help you feel that authenticity from her, but then also just take you on her journey along her speaking experience. And then afterwards, of course, really talk about it, like what were some of those takeaways? What did the audience say? If you can even capture that on your phone, awesome, so just really remember that you're an intriguing person to event organizers out there who are looking for new, innovative, visionary people, voices of all backgrounds to kind of bring into their world. So we want to be brought into your world, so we trust it enough to bring you into ours, into our events. So do a better job at sort of like bringing us on that trajectory.
And so going back to during the conference, so, we talk to our clients a lot about tips on what to wear, what not to wear. So what are, from the videography standpoint, what suggestions would you have to speakers on movement on the stage or not? What to wear or what not to wear? Communicating, obviously, we talked a little bit about how to communicate with the videographer what you want, but what are some tips for the actual speaker to kind of get the best looking video for their speaker reels?
Solid color. So I'm wearing a solid color today, very strategically, because we were going to be doing this. So me speaking. So solid colors are the way to go. Avoid patterns. And that goes for both being on stage or in front of a room. It's just distracting. So solid colors, like, and bright colors are fine. So pinks, reds, blues, yellow, whatever, like just a solid print, nothing, no patterns. That is probably, my first and best piece of advice. The other thing is, if you are speaking on a stage and you know that there's going to be some pipe and drape, right? Some drape behind you, ask the organizer what color the drape is, because a lot of us tend to wear black, which black is always my go-to color. But here's the thing, 95% of the time, the pipe and drape is black. So what has happened a lot is you look like a floating head because you zoomed in with the background. And when you're recording that, it completely makes you look like a walking head on camera. So, or a talking head, I should say. So make sure that you ask those questions. Hey, if there's drape behind me, what color is it? That way you avoid wearing that same color. This goes for the men too, because your suit jacket may be black and then you're blending in with the drape still. So those are questions to ask. For my ladies, the other thing is we like to wear, and I am wearing my earrings today, but we like to wear chunky necklaces and, things that really make you stand out, as you should. However, and you can do that, but make sure that when you're being mic'd, so if you're wearing that lavalier microphone, sometimes AV companies on site do a good job at this. Sometimes they don't, because they're just like rinse and repeat and rushing through things, and that's okay. But this is where you can come in to make sure that everyone's doing their due diligence. Make sure that the microphone is not too close to your necklace or to your earrings. That way you're not getting that annoying, like every time you move and it's Exactly. Yeah. No bangles, none of that stuff on your wrists. Like, just keep it simple. Just the less noise interference from jewelry that you're wearing, the better. So that would be, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I would advise you, but absolutely, you want to make sure you're walking. You're not just standing. The worst is when, you've got a really dynamic message, but you're just standing at the podium.
It's a disconnect.
It's total disconnect.
Yeah.
Incorporate into your presentations, into your slides, video and sound and music. Don't just speak to people and at them for 60 minutes. Are there polling questions that you can incorporate, to whether it's virtual or hybrid or fully in person? Are there things that you can do to really engage the audience and give them that like reset of their brain so they're captivated by you again? And you're not just like watching, they're not just watching you for 60 minutes standing at a podium. There's nothing worse than that. The other thing is your voice. Fluctuate your voice. And I've had to learn this through my broadcasting world is you have to have some range in your voice, and you don't want to be monotone. And sometimes you don't realize that you're monotone. So record yourself, play it back, hear how you sound. I've had to do this many a times as a journalist and someone who does a lot of on-camera work, because I'm like, oh, that didn't sound too bad. Or, oh, my voice was really high pitched there. Maybe I should tone it down. So it's not just wardrobe, but it's like your full delivery, like your full presence on stage, including what you're wearing.
Yes. Okay. Carol asks, question about diversity of speakers and panelists. What's the best way to ask event organizers about that? And so I should say that this comes up because, and Carol does this and I do it too. We try to, when we're asked to speak somewhere, we try to make sure that there is diversity among the speakers so that we are not being part of the issue of having all white speakers on panels or at conferences, so that we can start to kind of alleviate that issue. So how have you ever been asked that question, or do you know of anybody that's been asked that question? And what is the best way to get that information from the conference organizers?
Well, one, thank you for being considerate of that. And I will say that diversity and inclusion is a huge topic of conversation amongst event organizers for many reasons. And speaking is one of them. Panelists, absolutely at the top of the agenda when it comes to their thought process. So asking them straight up, hey, event organizer X, I really would love to be part of this panel. What do the rest of the panelists look like and sound like? I mean, because it's not just diversity in look, but diversity in thought. Am I going to bring something different to the table? Or are we all going to be saying the same thing? So they would actually appreciate that question if you bring it to their attention and they're not just the ones bringing it to your attention. It's a simple ask because it actually is something that is at the top of the conversations right now. I know for us, for my local board here in Orlando, we always talk about, okay, well, if we have a panel, we want diversity in gender, we want diversity in background, ethnicity, and then also diversity in thought. So we really do put a lot of strategy around tailoring our panelists within that scope. So we are absolutely on the organizer side thinking about that for sure, but they will appreciate knowing that you're thinking about it too. And here's the thing, you don't want to lose the speaking gig because, it may not fit the diversity of the vision, but then offer, the opportunity to make me speak on a different panel or solo, in a different session. Oh, hey, by the way, I know this panel may not work, but maybe, I can speak on XYZ. So always come back with a solution. So, they know that the door is open. Like you don't need to shut the door on either side.
Good point. But then at least you've made them aware that you are paying attention to that, which I think if more and more speakers do that, there becomes more, even obviously you said they are having those conversations, but then if for some reason they're not, it gets on their radar.
Yeah, for sure. And exactly. And here's the thing, sometimes, it ends up that a panel is not very diverse. I mean, I just watched a women's panel that was all Caucasian women, and there was nothing wrong with that. It just happened to be good for whatever that topic was, and for a certain conversation that was being had. That's okay. So most of the time the organizer has thought that stuff through, and it may just have ended up that it was a not very diverse panel for maybe content reasons or whatever the reasoning may be. But if you bring it to their attention and you just ask the question, hey, how diverse is this panel going to be? Am I going to be joined, by people that have a difference in thought and in appearance than I do? There's nothing wrong with just asking them that.
So if there are any other questions, everybody pop them in the comments. Like I said, we'll definitely go back and look at the questions, and feel free to ask all your questions. We'll get in there and answer them. Sarah, is there anything else that you want to share with our audience about being a standout speaker?
There actually is one other thing. So you may be an expert at, we talked about you being that expert at that one thing, right? What's your one shining moment of a topic?
Right.
But the other thing that is increasingly important now more than ever is for you to also present yourself as a human. And what I mean by that is lead with emotion and with feeling and with personal stories. Diane, I know you do a great job at that in your presentation. So those are so important, and here's why. I haven't heard Diane speak in 2-3 years maybe now.
Yeah, right.
We haven't seen each other. So I still remember the story from your presentation. And that's my point, is those personal stories really resonate with people. And you are speaking to people at the end of the day. So always lead with your heart, and then your expertise will follow. People will know that you're an expert at whatever you're an expert at, right? Whether it's branding or whatever, technology, or it doesn't matter. But that layer of being personal is always going to be unique because it's unique to you. So find that story in your world that you maybe haven't incorporated yet into your presentation and start doing that. And I guarantee you, people will walk away really remembering you and who you are. And everything that you say after that is just going to make sense to them, right? Because they've connected with you. It's all about creating that connection. So if you think about that and you work that in and you kind of kick off your presentation that way, and also you share that with, some way, somehow, whether it's through video or whatever in your speaker application, it'll set you apart.
Oh, great tip. I hope people stayed to the end of this to get that tip. That's an excellent tip. I never thought about that, about sharing that in the speaker application. I am going to make a note of that. So I love that.
Definitely. Yeah. It's always good to just humanize yourself. That's what people remember. And I can tell you out of I've heard tons of speakers over the past, decade. Yeah. And the ones that I really remember are not the ones that gave me all the data and statistics on blah, blah, blah. They're the ones that are sharing and getting vulnerable about who they are as people, and then how they became experts in whatever it was. And then I retain that information for the long haul. That's what makes you effective.
Such a great point. I don't know who the famous person is that said people don't remember what you did for them, but they remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so true. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
All right. Sarah, do you want to just tell our audience real quick how they can get in touch with you if they do want to work with you?
Yes. My email is Sarah, SARAH, at SolimanProductions.com. So it's just my last name that you can see right down here, productions.com. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. I'm also happy to, if you have any questions that you think of after this discussion, please feel free to reach out. I mean, we're here to help one another, and I hope that you found this conversation and these tips helpful as you continue on your speaker journey. But that is really the best way to reach me. Other than that, you can also find me on LinkedIn, Sarah Soliman. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and I do it all. So
yeah, she's everywhere. Trust me. And she's there as Sarah Soliman, also as Soliman Productions on Instagram.
Correct.
So
yeah.
Get on there. And I do think you, everybody who's watching this, follow Sarah too, because on Instagram, because you will get some behind the scenes stuff, which I think is helpful to see what goes into putting on events to kind of give you a better window into maybe what event organizers are looking for. I think understanding that backstage stuff and the work that you do and kind of the behind the scenes of that is very helpful from a speaker standpoint, I think.
Awesome. Well, no, that's great to know. And, we'll continue to share all the behind the scenes that is helpful to people. And yeah, I hope we get to see you speak at one of our events that we're covering in the future.
I hope so. It would be nice to see you in person sometime soon.
I know, seriously.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us on Backstage at Speaking Your Brand. I truly appreciate you taking the time to share all your knowledge with our audience, and I know they appreciate it too.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you all so much for joining. And Diane, always a pleasure. So good to see you.
Thank you again to Sarah Soliman for coming on our LinkedIn Live show and for Diane Diaz for hosting that conversation. Wasn't that incredible? Like I said in the intro, I took so many notes and I'm sure you did too. Don't forget to download our free workbook on how to position yourself as a thought leader. This will also get you on our email list so that you know when we do our future LinkedIn Live shows. They're every other Monday, as well as when we enroll again for our Thought Leader Academy. So get the guide, get on our email list by going to speakingyourbrand.com/guide. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/guide. Next week's episode, we're continuing these episodes all around in-person speaking, which we know is coming back slowly, but it's going to start ramping up, especially as we get into 2022. Last week's episode was behind the scenes of my recent in-person keynote. Today's episode was all about how to get selected as a speaker by event organizers. Next week's episode, my guest and I are talking specifically about audience engagement strategies for in-person speaking. So especially when you're doing in-person speaking, how can you make sure that you continuously engage your audience? So make sure to hit subscribe or follow in your podcast app so you don't miss our future episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening.